Welcome to this deep dive. We've sifted through the material you shared, and today we're focusing on something often called a hidden enemy.
Or a silent fire even, something that could be behind, persistent health issues or weight that just won't shift.
Exactly. We're talking about chronic inflammation.
Hmm.
So in this dive, we really want to unpack what that actually means.
Yeah, figure out what causes it in our, modern lives and really explore that deep connection it has to weight gain and chronic disease.
And crucially, pull out the strategies, the actionable things from these sources to help you, dampen that internal fire and maybe find better health.
Definitely. Understanding this could really be a game changer.
Okay, let's get into it. First off, inflammation itself. It's not inherently bad, is it? What is it fundamentally?
Not bad at all. Initially, it's your body's completely normal and vital response to injury or invaders. Think germs, bacteria.
It's the first responder system kicking in.
Precisely. Your immune system mobilizing to protect and repair.
Like if you cut your finger, it gets red, maybe swells up a bit. That's it.
Exactly. That's acute inflammation. It happens fast. It's temporary. The area gets red, warm, swollen, maybe a bit sore. That's your immune system sending out the troops, inflammatory cells, chemical signals called cytokines to trap germs, clear debris, and start healing.
So it's targeted, short-lived. Like an emergency crew that comes in, does the job, and leaves. The redness, swelling, heat, signs of healing.
Yes, a necessary, temporary, protective process. But then there's the other side of the coin.
Chronic inflammation.
Right. This is where that fire, that immune response, it doesn't shut off. It lingers. Low grade, but persistent. For months, maybe years.
So the troops never stand down.
Kind of like that. And instead of healing, this constant low-level activation starts to damage healthy cells, tissues, organs over time. A slow burn.
And this is the tricky one because it often doesn't scream at you with obvious symptoms like a cut finger does.
Yeah.
It's more subtle.
Much harder to spot sometimes. It's that silent inflammation. The very processes meant to protect you end up causing harm because they're just always active.
Okay, so if it's silent, what are the signs? Or maybe, what conditions are linked to this underlying fire the sources connect it to a lot?
Yeah, the symptoms can be pretty vague, unfortunately. Not like sharp pain, more like ongoing fatigue that you can't explain.
Like bone tired.
Exactly. Or trouble sleeping, maybe joint pain or stiffness without a clear injury, recurring headaches, sometimes digestive problems, abdominal pain, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, reflux.
I saw mood disorders mentioned too, depression, anxiety.
Absolutely. And definitely weight gain or finding it really, really hard to lose weight. That's a big one.
And this isn't just a side effect, is it? The sources suggest it's often a driving force behind major chronic diseases.
It really seems to be. It's implicated in, a huge range. Autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, cardiovascular issues, heart disease, high blood pressure.
Cancers too.
Certain cancers, yes. Digestive diseases like Crohn's or inflammatory bowel disease. Lung conditions like asthma, COPD, and as you said, mental health conditions.
Metabolic problems like type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. It's quite a list.
It is. And one statistic that really jumped out from the sources, inflammatory diseases are estimated to account for more than half of all deaths worldwide.
Wow. Over half. That really puts it into perspective. This isn't a minor issue.
Not at all. It shows how central this process is. And, while we see clear links, like with rheumatoid arthritis, where inflammation is obviously key, or with obesity, where fat cells actually produce inflammatory chemicals,
Right.
the sources also note that the precise why chronic inflammation starts and just keeps going in many people, especially related to things like obesity, is still being actively researched. We know what's happening, but the root trigger can be complex.
Which brings us to the causes. If it's not usually a single injury, what is fueling this chronic state?
It mostly comes down to our environment and our daily lifestyle choices, according to the sources.
Our modern way of life seems to be a big theme.
It really is. Several key things pop up again and again. Diet is huge. Regularly eating foods that promote inflammation. Think trans fats, maybe excessive salt.
Okay.
An imbalance in your gut microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, that's called dysbiosis. Big factor. Chronic stress is another major one. Just constant unmanaged stress.
Sleep disruption too, I bet.
Definitely. Poor sleep, messing with your body clock, that directly ramps up inflammation, not moving enough low physical activity levels, and carrying excess body weight.
Especially that belly fat, right? The visceral fat.
Yes, that deep abdominal fat is Particularly problematic, very inflammatory. In fact, excess weight itself is listed as a common cause of chronic inflammation.
A vicious cycle, then.
It can be. Then you have exposure to environmental toxins, air pollution, industrial chemicals, using tobacco products, of course, and drinking too much alcohol regularly.
So it's this mix of diet, stress, sleep, movement, weight, toxins. Our whole environment, really. Let's really focus on the weight connection, because that's such a struggle for so many. How does this inflammation actually mess with weight?
Okay, this is crucial. Chronic inflammation throws a wrench into several systems that manage weight and metabolism. It's often a cycle.
How so?
First, insulin resistance. All those inflammatory signals make your cells less responsive to insulin. Insulin's job is to help glucose get into cells for energy.
Right.
When cells resist insulin, sugar builds up in your blood. Your body then tends to store that excess sugar as fat, especially that visceral belly fat we mentioned.
Making it super hard to lose weight, even if you're cutting calories.
Exactly. It's like your metabolism is blocked. Second, hormone imbalance. Inflammation can mess with appetite-regulating hormones, leptin, which signals I'm full, and ghrelin, which signals I'm hungry. When they're out of whack, you might get increased cravings, feel hungry even after eating, never quite satisfied.
So your body's signals are all mixed up. Makes it hard to eat intuitively.
Very hard. Third, the gut connection, gut dysbiosis, or leaky gut. Inflammation, often starting from a poor diet or stress, can damage the gut lining. When that barrier is weak, stuff like undigested food particles or toxins can leak into the bloodstream where they don't belong. This triggers more inflammation throughout the body, creating a systemic issue.
So a problem in the gut can spread the inflammation everywhere else.
It can definitely fuel the fire systemically. And finally, sheer fatigue. Chronic inflammation is exhausting. It just saps your energy.
Right.
And when you feel constantly drained and sluggish, you're less likely to exercise, less likely to make healthy food choices. It feeds back on itself. Inflammation causes fatigue. Fatigue makes it harder to do the things that reduce inflammation.
And long term, this isn't just about weight. As we said, it's linked to all those serious diseases. The connection is fundamental.
Absolutely. Trying to run your body's system smoothly while dealing with constant internal inflammation, it just undermines everything: energy, hormones, cell function.
So the big question, what can we do? If modern life fuels this, how do we fight back? The sources are pretty clear on strategies, starting with food.
Yes, diet is incredibly powerful here. Think of it as using your plate as an anti-inflammatory tool.
Okay, what's on the yes list? What should we eat more of?
Load up on foods rich in antioxidants and phytonutrients. These fight the damage. So lots of colorful fruits and veggies, berries are fantastic. Leafy greens like spinach and kale, broccoli, bell peppers.
Bright colors equal good stuff.
Generally, yes. And don't forget spices. Turmeric and ginger get special mentions for their anti-inflammatory power. Garlic, too.
Little powerhouses in the spice rack.
They really are. Also critical, omega-3 fatty acids. These fats actively fight inflammation. Think fatty fish salmon, mackerel, sardines.
And plant sources.
Flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts are great plant-based sources of omega-3s.
Fiber's important too, right? For the gut and blood sugar.
Definitely. Whole grains, oats, quinoa, brown rice, plus legumes like lentils, chickpeas, black beans. They feed good gut bacteria, help stabilize blood sugar, fight that insulin resistance link.
Makes sense.
Green tea also gets a nod for its antioxidants, like EGCG. And basic hydration, plenty of water, helps flush things out. The sources mention that established healthy patterns like the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet are basically anti-inflammatory ways of eating.
And maybe see a dietitian for personalized advice.
Always a good idea if you need tailored guidance.
Okay, that's the good stuff. Now, the no list. What fuels the fire and should be limited or avoided?
Top of the list. Added sugars and refined carbs. Sugary drinks, candy, pastries, white bread, most processed snacks. They spike your blood sugar and trigger inflammation.
Sugar seems to be a recurring villain.
It's a big one for inflammation, yes. Also, processed vegetable oils high in omega-6 fats, corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil. We need some omega-6, but modern diets often have way too much compared to omega-3s, and that imbalance promotes inflammation.
So focus on olive oil, avocado oil instead.
That's what the sources suggest, yeah. And trans fats, really bad news. Often in fried foods, some baked goods, certain margarines, highly inflammatory.
What about processed meats?
Also on the list to limit. Bacon, sausage, deli meats. They often have lots of saturated fat, sodium, sometimes nitrates, all potentially inflammatory.
And cutting back on excessive alcohol and salt.
Yes. And, of course, the big one for overall prevention mentioned is avoiding tobacco entirely. That's fundamental.
So diet is huge, a cornerstone, but it's not the whole picture, right?
Yeah.
Lifestyle factors are just as critical.
Absolutely critical. You can't out-eat chronic stress or chronic sleep deprivation, Lifestyle is medicine here, too.
So what are the key lifestyle strategies to cool things down?
Stress management is huge. Chronic stress means chronic cortisol, and that fuels inflammation. Finding daily practices that work for you, meditation, deep breathing, yoga, time in nature, hobbies, it's essential.
Finding that off switch for the stress response.
Exactly. Then, quality sleep. Lack of good sleep is a direct cause of inflammation for many. It messes up hormones, ramps up inflammatory markers. Aiming for that 7-9 hour window of restorative sleep is key.
Crucial, even if challenging sometimes.
Okay.
What about movement?
Regular movement, but smart movement. Consistent, moderate exercise actually lowers inflammation, but overdoing it, like extreme training without recovery, can backfire and increase it.
So consistency over intensity, maybe.
For inflammation, yes. Aim for about 150 minutes a week of moderate activity, walking, swimming, cycling, plus some strength and flexibility work.
Got it. And toxins.
Reducing environmental toxin exposure matters. Since it's listed as a cause, taking steps like filtering your water, using greener cleaning products, choosing organic when possible, maybe an air purifier for your home, these can lower your body's overall inflammatory burden.
And the weight factor comes back again here as a strategy.
It does. Maintaining a healthy weight is key. Since excess fat, especially visceral fat, drives inflammation, losing weight if you need to is one of the most direct ways to reduce that inflammatory load.
Okay, so pulling this all together. Tackling chronic inflammation isn't just about dropping pounds, although that's clearly linked.
Not at all. It's really about improving your overall vitality, drastically cutting your risk for all those chronic diseases we listed, and just feeling fundamentally better, more energetic.
By using these strategies, the food choices, managing stress, sleep, movement, reducing toxins, you're essentially building a more resilient, less inflamed internal environment.
Exactly. You're tackling it from multiple angles, creating a foundation for better health.
Now, the sources did also touch on medical help for inflammation.
Right. Important distinction. For acute stuff, like a sprain, it's rest, ice, compression, elevation rice, basic first aid. For suspected chronic inflammation or ongoing symptoms, you absolutely need to see a healthcare provider.
They might suggest specific things.
They might. Supplements like zinc, certain vitamins, omega-3s were mentioned, but always talk to your doctor before starting supplements. They can interact with things or aren't right for everyone.
Medications.
Yes. Over-the-counter NSAIDs like ibuprofen can help short-term, but the sources warn against using them for more than 10 days without guidance. Prescription options like corticosteroids are stronger but need careful medical management.
And of course, emergencies like broken bones need immediate medical attention. These treatments are doctor-guided.
Precisely. The diet and lifestyle stuff we talked about, that's the powerful foundation you can build every day. But diagnosis and treatment of specific conditions need professional medical input.
Okay, this deep dive really painted a picture of chronic inflammation as this, significant underlying factor impacting so much of our health, weight, disease risk, just how we feel day to day.
Yeah, and how our modern world unintentionally sometimes provides the perfect fuel for it, but also how much power we have through conscious choices about food and lifestyle to counteract it.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of it all. Diet, stress, sleep, movement, environment, all shaping that internal inflammatory state. So thinking about how pervasive this seems to be and how deeply it's linked to overall well-being, what does understanding this change about how you might approach your own health and daily habits? Something to think about.